Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Jennifer Caniglio, and I'm with Corporate Counsel Business Journal. It is my pleasure to introduce today's webcast, Expanding Roles and Comfort Zones, How Corporate Counsel Can Meet Data Imperatives Head-On, presented by CCBJ and H5. Our distinguished speakers are Mira Edelman, Senior Corporate Counsel for Dish Network, Kimberly Kwan, Global Head of E-Discovery and Digital Forensic Investigations for Juniper Networks, Carla Webby, Director, Legal and Compliance Business Solutions for H5, and Sheila Mackey, Managing Director, E-Discovery Services for H5. Before we kick things off, I'd like to address a few housekeeping items. Regarding CLE credits, please be sure to fill out the survey as well as respond to the pop-up check-ins. We will apply for CLE credit to specific states after the completion of the webinar. CLE credit is only available for the live day and not on demand. Please bring to your attention some icons on your console. The green resource icon is where you'll be able to download the deck and materials. The purple Q&A icon will allow you to ask questions directly to the speakers or reach out if you're having technical issues. And the teal survey icon allows you to express your thoughts in our survey. And now, I'd like to pass it off to Sheila. Sheila?
Thanks, Jen. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today to discuss the topic of expanding roles and comfort zones. We're incredibly fortunate today to have three industry veterans join us for this conversation. Mira Edelman is a senior corporate counsel at Dish Network, where she focuses on litigation and e-discovery. Prior to that, Mira was director in Facebook's legal department, where she established the company's e-discovery services team, and then went on to take a role as Associate General Counsel, where she developed information governance policies and programs. Before that, Mira spent 6 years as Senior Counsel at Google, and she began her legal career at Hughes Hubbard and Reed in Washington, D.C. Kimberly Kwan, also known as KQ, is the Global Head of E-Discovery and Digital Forensic Investigations at Juniper Networks. As a key member of the information security team, KQ provides leadership and oversight in the areas of forensics, e-discovery, data loss prevention, and information governance. Prior to Juniper, KQ engaged with clients on behalf of her own boutique consulting firm. And in her career, she's handled engagements with clients in the Americas, Asia Pacific, and EMEA. KQ assisted Farmers Insurance Group with building an excellent information governance and litigation support program. This program was honored in 2017 with ARMA International's highest award. Carla Webby is my colleague and is the Director of Legal and Compliance Business Solutions at H5. She leverages her experience to be a liaison between business, legal, and IT functions to help companies identify and manage the issues stemming from large stores of electronic data. And she collaborates with legal teams on case and data strategy, as well as the efficient utilization litigation tools and methodologies. Prior to joining H5, Carla worked for Bechtel, a 450 global construction and engineering company. During her 15 years at Bechtel, she managed and built out and managed their global e-discovery program. So, thank you to our panelists. We also want to thank the audience for joining us today. Reminder before we get started that the views expressed are those of the speakers and not their companies. As mentioned, today is Expanding Roles and Comfort Zones, How Corporate Counsel Can Meet Data Imperatives Head-On. So we're going to dive into a couple of topics, including synergies among corporate stakeholders to ensure alignment across teams, tying initiatives to cross-functional strategies, reporting, and budget, and then decision-making with an eye on efficacy and defensibility of solutions. So to get started, we're going to ask Carla to sort of set the table for the conversation with a couple slides, and then we'll come back and talk to the panelists. Carla?
Good morning and good afternoon to all. We're in a moment of change. The economy, there's a structural change in the economy. Many businesses are redesigning their business around data and leveraging it to increase and add revenue streams. They're using it to improve their customer experience. And we are also using it in our modern lives. We're also becoming more data-driven. We use our phones to count our steps and to give us information about where we are. So data is taking on a new life in our economy, in our world. So this shift has a great impact on how we collect, interact, use, and secure access data as well. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Carl.
So, okay, good. So as a result, many different functions in the enterprise and stakeholders have been tasked with strategic and operational initiatives that are meant to tackle the complexities of data in these changing times. You know, IT has its traditional role, and you see it there in the corporate environment, of managing the infrastructure, upgrades, complex data migrations between different applications. They have to ensure accessibility and availability around the globe, facilitate collaboration, manage the accumulation of email and other unstructured data. They deal with the challenges of the cloud. They work with the information governance and records management teams as a result on defensible disposal and retention policies. These teams also are tasked with extracting from mingled data, data to be turned over as part of a divestiture, or to support due diligence efforts during mergers and acquisitions. You have the emergence of privacy teams and HR working together to manage third-party and vendor risk under the GDPR and other privacy regulations, compliance requirements there. You have compliance team with increasing investigations needing to, launch internal investigations, to manage and monitor compliance actively beyond just checking a box. You have in-house litigation teams that are tasked with fulfilling e-discovery obligations, controlling e-discovery costs, overseeing litigation. And you have InfoSec, for example, tasked with securing data and responding to cyber threats. Business owners that are managing the data within their functions to get their work done. That's all inside the corporation. And these players are also interacting with the outside world. And, for example, the litigation, investigation, and compliance teams are working with outside counsel on the substance of their matter, but they may also retain e-discovery teams. You have customers and third parties, providers, and experts and consultants. So it's a connected and complex world of stakeholders. And so people have, for a long time, worked in their silos, but the connection of certain processes and requirements has forced us, in a way, to come out and work together. An example in the past was when the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure required new preservation hold activities that led to IT and records and legal working together to establish a whole process. Today, it's going to perhaps be the evolution of e-discovery needing to incorporate the changing landscape around privacy, which could impact collections, the identification of PII before the data is turned over, et cetera. So, we are being propelled forward and asked to work together. And so if you look at the next slide, Sheila, our increased need to work together around these complex issues is highlighting a commonality in the processes and the technologies that are being used by these multiple functions. I think many functions are taking similar steps. Like if you look at record retention and data management, investigations, litigation, they're going to develop similar methodologies, and even though they may have a different perspective or a different outcome. So let's take it, for example, the need for a data map or inventory. Data map in litigation investigations often referred to as inventory for DSAR responses and privacy initiatives. It's also something that InfoSec teams use when responding to a cyber threat. And so it's a process by which teams identify where their data is, who the data owners are, and how much they have. Many of these processes also need to be part of the management of preserved data that legal and sometimes compliance have placed on hold. And so even in the context of a divestiture, you may be looking and make sure that you've identified data hold before you turn over information. You're working on the suspension of the retention policies when you're placing a hold, for example. Another core and really core function across these initiatives, these projects, is really the reliance on search and data analysis. And that can happen in place within the company's environment, or once the data has been sent to a provider or to outside counsel. And these methodologies are often targeted at finding or categorizing data sets, potentially relevant data, data that belongs to a certain party, data that contain, as part of the DSAR process, for example, or a divestiture. These methodologies can range from a simple search on the network to much more advanced search methodologies using AI, for example. The next category is often, which is shared, is identifying data risks within your population. It could be attorney-client communications that could be analyzed and potentially identified as privileged in the context of litigation or investigations. It could be business-sensitive data that you don't want to make sure that doesn't get into the wrong hands, IP information, competitive pricing. It also certainly PII, PCI, PHI. And often as part of this analysis, you need the ability to review, even sometimes redact these documents, for DSAR requests, to turn over documents for divestitures or litigations and investigation. Ultimately, the outcome of this for the data that it remains, in the hands of the corporation, it's, migration and defensible disposal initiatives as well. Underlying all this, and often, is the need for a defensible process, or one that you can explain, so at least documented, but sometimes the methodology needs to allow for validation steps. It can be simple or as complex as statistical sampling steps. And really, ultimately, the aim of this is to allow you to have the confidence and the trust in your decisions and to be able to facilitate action and not paralysis. So, different teams approach, this process, differently. But still, in using at the core the same methods. So as we're working more on this, we're seeing this convergence and the opportunity to begin perhaps a new evolution in the way we are addressing, data management and some of these core initiatives.
Okay, thanks, Carla. I appreciate that. So let's go ahead and dive into some of the topics we were going to talk about today. And we're going to kick off with the convergence of roles within organizations. Many enterprise roles are converging because there are more and more cross-functional teams working together. Mira, do you attribute this to the data and or technological evolution we've been experiencing for many years?
I think it's both. Certainly, as Carla has just reviewed, there is a growing body of data that we need to think about across the corporation. And we've got a growing body of regulations that are affecting different types of data, both in the US and abroad. So think about privacy regulations, export control regulations. And then, of course, companies also worry about data security risks that have been heightened now that much of the workforce is remote because of COVID. And so I think, structuring some sort of cross-functional groups to dive into issues that involve data and technology can help to provide a better outcome for the company. Generally, companies have a desire to keep just what they need or just what is required, and then they want to balance that with having some inadvertent or accidental deletion of data. So there's like that sweet spot in the middle. And if you get different verticals, such as the ones that Carla had described, interact in a way with making decisions about data, hopefully you get a very good outcome. And I think the technology piece is that we're starting to understand that there's such a great variety of technology out there, either in existence or built specifically to handle new data issues. And that has a downstream effect. The type of technology you select at your company to handle your data has a downstream effect into multiple company verticals in terms of the ability to analyze, preserve, collect, delete, produce, any of those items. So I think there's two things driving this convergence, data and technology, and they are interrelated.
Sheila, I think you're on mute.
Thank you. I was. Thanks. So, KQ, with what Mira was just saying, and if you look at that relatedness or interrelatedness and convergence, is that broadening your purview as a risk advisor within your company?
I think so. At my current company, people are really very collaborative, and there are a myriad of broad initiatives where there are overlap. And what I'm finding is that each person or team brings subject matter expertise, and we're coming together. My background being both a technologist and having the legal side as well allows me to liaise between disparate groups, but I am finding that willingness is there across the company, which makes the initiatives obviously easier to deal with because of the transparency and the cooperation that's occurring. I think that in that same vein, we're thinking about how to best collaborate, and that brings about our discussion as well about technology and how do we make sure to use technology and leverage that technology in a way that benefits not only the team that may be looking at a certain platform or application, but the company as a whole.
Yeah, that's interesting because you are bringing so many pieces of that puzzle together. So Mira, when you look at bringing those different stakeholders to as KQ is just saying, so it's covering privacy, security, defensibility, monitoring, ethics, compliant, all of that together, it really must require you to understand pieces and parts of that, even though you're bringing a lot of subject matter experts to the table. Is it like broadening your knowledge and what any individual person brings to the equation?
Yeah, absolutely. I think these cross-functional groups are advantageous to every member of the group. As you said, we each bring our subject matter expertise, and then this gives us the opportunity to learn about how data and technology affect other verticals in the company. It also allows the formation of allies. So a lot of times you need to sell a decision to the business, or you have to find budget to cover something that you believe you need. So if you can get a liaison of legal, compliance, and privacy to agree on something, it's a lot stronger of a push than than just as legal going and asking for something from the business. It builds relationships. So I find that, having worked in these types of teams, I now know folks across different verticals in the company. And so I have a way in if I need information about something else entirely different. I know kind of who has a role in an area that I might need to run down for a different matter entirely. So, and then on the flip side, it gives the other team members who are experts in other areas insight into my world in legal and e-discovery. Like they start to understand the language that we speak about legal hold or preservation or discovery, which is very helpful. I think one of the questions I've gotten over and over in-house over the years is, when can we lift legal hold? When will it be over? And you try to explain, like, it's not over until it's over. There's no definitive date. When we say to present, that's a moving target. And so something like that, to have that be understood by an IT team who is always fighting to delete data and get space back is very helpful.
Yes, I find that to be true as well. And that's why my current position, being part of the IT/InfoSec team, is it's been a really good experience because I have these synergies with legal and compliance that I've always had from those being my family, but now being part of the IT team and being able to, be on both sides and see that collaboration through, it's been really eye-opening.
So carrying on this topic of convergence in communications, we're certainly seeing, particularly over I'd say the last maybe 3 to 5 years, just an explosion of new communication and collaboration platforms. So Mira, as there are more and more, do you find that they've really helped those synergies that you're creating cross-departmental teams?
Yes, absolutely. So many of you probably don't know, but Dish decided recently to migrate from a Microsoft world into a Google G Suite world. And so the Microsoft environment that we had when I arrived at Dish about 1.5 years ago did not really encourage collaboration. There were shared drives that were locked off among different teams. People generally relied on their email as their file cabinets, even though there were collaborative platforms like OneDrive and SharePoint in Microsoft. They just weren't really being used that much across different teams. So migrating to G Suite with Google Drive has allowed for a reevaluation of how teams do collaborate. And so there are ways that we're able to now share data across different teams through permissions on folders, rather than different network drives that require, greater attention from our IT team to give permissions to users. It's improved our use of collaboration for meetings. We use chat, we use video now as well. And just the fact that, you can link a document in email rather than sending around various versions while you're editing it has been very helpful to manage the amount of data and files that we store. I think collaboration platforms, wherever they happen to be, and there are a number of other ones, I'm just kind of speaking from my own experience in the current situation, are the way of the future. It's a way to attempt to control data, understand, where is that one true source of data, and manage it appropriately through credentials rather than individual email file cabinets, so to speak.
But that transition from Microsoft to Google is interesting. So KQ, same sort of question to you about communicating and collaboration platforms with outside counsel, service providers, experts, so people outside of your company. How is that working?
So I'm trying to utilize it more. We recently moved we have many different platforms, but we recently, like a lot of people, moved to Teams from Skype and other Microsoft products. We also have some Google products. But in trying to really take advantage of the collaboration potential of Teams, we're thinking about how to allow external people to utilize it and to come in and share information. but really we want everyone to be conscious of who is in our channels, part of the teams, et cetera. So something that we really look at is the change management aspect. It's not only what benefit do we want to get from these collaboration tools, but how should we roll them out? It really needs to be architected, and thought needs to go into how long, the retention period is going to be for these different channels or teams or what have you, and who's going to be allowed to post files, and are those going to be allowed to be sent through the distribution list, et cetera. So lots of different questions to think about. I'm finding that our partners in outside counsel, some of them aren't very quick to move toward this type of collaboration. One of our third-party service providers, we have weekly calls about cases and things like that. And I had to ask them to stop dialing in on the phone because I wanted people logging in. I wanted to make sure that they were coming in through their proper accounts. We used to have several phone numbers popping up, and I would have to ask, who is this, to make sure that you were supposed to be on the call. So, it's a different path for some. I think that I see a shift. Everyone's now working from home, or at least a lot of people still are. And there's had to be a move to this virtual world. Not a big change for my colleagues and me, being at a global company where we work with our colleagues around the world all the time. But with outside counsel, with service providers, partners, and things like that, I've seen it has been, quite a paradigm shift for them. And we're just kind of urging everyone along and encouraging everyone to try to collaborate in a more modern way. So.
Right, we actually have a question, so I want to throw it into the mix here. And the question is, are there generally conflicts among groups or stakeholders about whether to go for an in-house solution or a third-party solution? I'm assuming related to collaboration, communication, technology. So KQ, do you have any thoughts on that?
So if we're talking about going, platforms provided like by Microsoft as opposed to, I'm not sure
something
what
might be that's homegrown
or something like that. We're a pretty large organization, and our focus is on, our core competencies and the products we're putting out into the marketplace. So I think that we've pretty much embraced mostly going with technology that has been built by those who have the expertise to do so. There definitely is a lot of consideration. We have groups of colleagues, stakeholders that we really, as I alluded to earlier, collaborate quite well when we're talking about these new initiatives, like rolling out Slack or something like that. What are the needs people have? And we really try to explore that before we jump in and license something. So I would say definitely going for best of breed is the way that we've been going.
Okay. Mira, anything to add to that?
No, a lot of that really resonates with me in terms of encouraging outside counsel to embrace some of the collaboration software. The moment with COVID has really given us more opportunity for those process improvements. As KQ said, most people are working from home, or portions of teams are working from home. So the ability to have a video conversation instead of a phone conversation is appealing. So there's kind of like that motivation for everyone involved in whatever the effort is. we've attempted to have greater control over our data security by sharing folders with our outside counsel in Google Drive. But of course, that functionality is available on other platforms as well. And that allows us to know, where the true master copies are of documents. It allows us to self-serve our outside counsel with frequently asked for documents. It allows us to provide guidances about how, what is the DISH way regarding litigation or discovery that we can reference them to. It gives us the ability to share templates with them. So I think, there's just a lot of opportunity right now to take advantage of this time that we may not have had embraced so much before. I can tell you that before we all started working remotely, we have a 2-building campus at DISH headquarters, and oftentimes folks would just stay in their office or their cube and dial into an 800 number rather than meet in person or even do a video call. And now I'm seeing, the friendly faces of both my internal colleagues and my outside counsel, my service providers, much more often than I did before. So I think that's a positive change.
That is a positive change. Okay, so we're going to go on to our next topic, which is making decisions about technology or other ways of communicating with an eye on efficacy and defensibility, and looking at those data initiatives across the enterprise. So we are kicking off with you again. Sorry about that with the double back there. But within the organization, how are decisions made related to acquisitions of software, automated workflows, whatever the case may be?
So this may also add some additional comments to the question that we got earlier. In my world at DISH, the legal e-discovery team is reactive to decisions about software brought in for the business, right? So there's any number of software and technologies being evaluated all the time at DISH for all of the different types of needs we have. We've set up a system where when new software has made it past the contract stage and we're actually looking at a proof of concept, that legal e-discovery does get involved, and we ask some basic questions in a form to understand who the owner is, what the purpose of the platform is, how we might be able to preserve or collect data if we need it. And then that survey gives us some information for a broader conversation with stakeholders. So even though it's reactive and we don't have the opportunity to push a particular software for the company, we do have a seat at the table, and that's worked out pretty well.
Okay. Carla, any thoughts from your experiences on this topic?
Yeah, I was thinking one thing I saw that seemed to bring legal into, the conversation in a new way was that legal was part of, the innovation teams and the evaluation of software for the business. And was helping the business actively in making the decisions from the legal perspective and to transform the way the company did business. And I noticed that, and it wasn't just only in the procurement side that they came in. I noticed that had a really positive effect.
Okay. And KQ, for Juniper, or for your team, is someone focused on figuring out the efficacy of tools? Like, are they working or are they not? And then Mira, I'm going to ask you sort of the opposite, which is to follow on is someone focused on the defensibility? Because those are two key things that are important in the sort of e-discovery compliance InfoGov world. But, privacy and risk and so many others are converging in. So who's focused on efficacy and who's focused on defensibility? So KQ, up first, please, for efficacy.
Yeah, actually, in terms of efficacy, because of the great collaboration between the teams, before we even bring something in, there's definitely, milestones, proof of concepts, things that we want to hit on before we adopt the technology. I think that even in the time that I've been at my company and I've seen the process happen, there is a way that we bring each other into it. I kind of consider myself still to be a consultant, even though I'm in-house now, because I let people know what I know, how I try to help, what I may be able to give perspective on. I try to be helpful in a non-obnoxious way, and end up thankfully being invited into the conversation at some point in time. And we're all kind of doing that for each other. So with that kind of transparency and communication, and choosing our technologies and talking about what the significance is to our different groups, which overlap somewhat, but also have our own initiatives and needs. It's been one thing to see that process, have it happen, bring our tools in, and then, like everyone, that everyone's busy. We can't all take advantage and know exactly what all the features are for our technologies. So really trying to help each other dig into that as well, and learn new use cases. What value are we getting in it? I probably can't speak to this as well as Mira can in terms of the after effects, because a lot of the technologies that we have recently brought in or are in the process of doing so, we still have a lot of due diligence to do on what the effects have been. But there's been a lot of discussion with our service providers that we really need to see value in what we've brought in-house. And so we kind of bring them into that discussion and have what I always term to be the help me help you discussion. Show us how we can get more value from your technology and from your services so that we can continue this relationship.
That's interesting. It was actually a question that was posted, so thanks for answering that. Thank you. So Mira, from the defensibility stance, is there someone or a team or teams focused on that when you're bringing in, whether it's new software, service providers, maybe bringing solutions to the table, automated workflow type tools? Is there someone focused solely on the defensibility of it?
Yeah, so for software platforms or technology that are used within business teams in the company that aren't related specifically to legal needs or e-discovery needs, the legal e-discovery team will ask certain questions to the business owner and have follow-up meetings to understand how will retention, preservation, collection, analysis be accomplished in the platform. It would be very rare that legal e-discovery could tell a business team that they can't use a platform because of challenges for legal or e-discovery issues. Basically, we gather information about the platform. We understand that the business has made a business need for it and received, a budget allocation for that. After looking at, a number of tools, we trust them to know what they need to do their business. And then we ask questions about how would we handle that data for legal e-discovery. Our legal compliance team is likely looking at those same platforms for purposes of proper retention practices for privacy or other regulated types of data, such as export control data or something like that. And so you're getting an understanding of the platform, and then you're evolving a workflow to handle the specific platform for whatever the core legal defensibility you need. So if it's on the compliance side, you want to make sure PII or PCI is being deleted on a schedule that's compliant with regulations. If you are trying to preserve data in a platform for litigation, you're going to try to figure out if the platform itself can handle that, or if you need to do something like collect and preserve. And then for looking at technological solutions for e-discovery specifically, or other platforms for within the legal department, we get much more involved there. Like, we are the business team that is making the business case for why this is the proper tool, why this is the best tool, and we're looking at how it functions in terms of if we had a challenge in litigation about what we were doing in our workflows. And so we're much more involved in that. So it's kind of two things. And as a kind of like benchmarker in terms of the migration from Microsoft to Google, legal e-discovery was very involved ensuring that the migration happened within some margin of error that was acceptable. We had a number of testing processes that we did for legal e-discovery that were separate from all of the other testing and beta testing that other IT and legal teams were doing. So, we're always involved with software. Sometimes it's a very light touch, and sometimes it's, very heavy involvement.
KQ, anything you wanted to add there?
Yeah, my experience has been in terms of both administrating the software, especially on the e-discovery side, and even for clients implementing it and then running it for cases. And so at my current company, there have been some platforms in place for the past few years. And what we're looking at now is whether or not we want to shift towards different models. And so, again, there is that great collaboration between me as someone being on the technical software side and user side, along with, for instance, our litigation team. And we partner together on what the course should be. Should we be bringing more in-house? Should we be looking at hosting our own in the cloud as opposed to putting more on the partner side? But all those discussions, again, are being had in a very collaborative way.
Okay, we actually have another question. We are going to point this to you to start, please. What kind of directives, if any, are you seeing from the C-suite in terms of the data initiatives that companies grapple with?
So one of the biggest priorities for C-suite is budget, right? Make it work at a price that makes sense for what we needed to do. I'm sure that played a role in deciding to move from Microsoft to G Suite. It's a fairly, manageable solution in terms of cost. And then there's a desire to make sure it's up and running with very little downtime, right? So whatever technology we use, and here I'll kind of like dip a little bit into like the programming world, right? Like we deliver TV programming and video content to users. We need whatever software we're running and technology we use to make sure that that happens consistently, or we will have irate customers. So I think those are two very important things to C-suite. On the business side, there's a desire to have beautiful software and beautiful interfaces for our users. So there's always an attempt to try to find partners who can help us deliver our content in a way that is very user-friendly and intuitive. On the business side for legal, I've had to make business cases for the type of software I want to use for litigation and e-discovery. And there is a true understanding by the C-suite that we have to have defensible software. So, we don't make the pitch using the word defensible. We explain, the risks and the things that we're trying to address in advance of having to be in front of a judge explaining something that we don't want to be out there embarrassed about. So there's definitely an understanding of the C-suite that legal needs software that works well and as intended. I'm grateful for that.
Okay. And while talking about budgets, let's just stay with that topic for a minute. Carla, when you worked in-house, was it common to have initiatives and budgets or initiatives that cross teams and budgets? Was that a common thing?
Yes, in my experience, when there was a cross-functional team established to address a particular issue, the budget was often shared, but there were times when we looked for the team that had budget to at least begin the process and, spearhead that aspect. That was, sometimes, litigation is a good entry point for budget. There was an instance where we needed to buy some data a software to migrate data for litigation. We purchased it, and then IT then, found budget on their end to continue to use this tool for data migrations later on. So it depends on the kind of project you're running.
KQ, do you see that as well?
Yes, definitely. I think that especially in these collaborative environments where teams are working together, stakeholders are talking, usually the importance crosses a lot of different teams and organizations. And so if something is really important to bring in, I see collaboration in terms of whose budget can we get this from, or can we share it? Again, a lot of that depends on that authentic discussion that comes about when people are really willing to talk about what's important to them and the risks, and trying to ameliorate those with their colleagues.
And KQ, staying with you for a second, when you have that cross-functional budget and advocacy and cross-functional teams, how do you report up? How does reporting happen? Is it consolidated? Or is it back more in the silos of the different groups, or how does that work?
Well, what I see being most effective is when we do have these teams that come together with stakeholders, and these stakeholders are typically really good at going back to their teams and getting the viewpoints. And so you can't have too many cooks in the kitchen, right? But if you have a couple of executive chefs and a sous chef, and everybody's bringing everybody else's things to light together in these discussions, then you can come together. I see a lot of coming back around, a lot of, thank you for your input. This is what came out of it. These are our next steps. I think that people feel really invested, and that their opinions are respected, and that they're not just asked for their thoughts and then it disappears into the ether and nothing happens again. There's actually a reward for investing your time in giving your actual viewpoints. That is something else interesting and unique at my company that I see as being more the norm. Whereas in my previous either client situations or in-house to other companies, it was different. It was the kind of meetings about meetings, and then later you think, oh, that meeting I had a few months ago, whatever happened with that? So.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Mira, anything to add there?
Get myself off mute there. I think it's been very helpful to have different expertise involved in decisions, because the more we can look at comprehensive solutions, or at least have an understanding of how different platforms interact with each other, you can anticipate the work going forward. So I also think this is a very good trend to have these cross-functional groups put together, to basically to make more efficiencies in workflows, to anticipate, things that might break and make changes, and basically handle data in a, more defensible, efficient way.
Staying with the budget topic for just one more question, we're certainly seeing with clients the great adoption of Slack. So that's clearly an initiative that is being funded by different companies. What are some of the other initiatives that are getting funding right now that are really on people's, either yours or other people in companies that are really focused on right now?
So on our radar, we are still finishing our migration from Microsoft to Google, and it's a lengthy process because of all the testing that has to be done. You want it to work as intended, and then you need to repair or improve links between other systems, make sure that credentials are proper, access is proper, retention is being followed and can be lifted if needed. So that is still a very large initiative. We have some great project managers working on that. Company-wide, we're also looking at contract management software. We're looking at knowledge management software, although Google Drive has helped with that a bit. But there are still teams using Microsoft, which we're fully able to use, and in legal we tend to use Microsoft quite a bit to have proper documents formatted and things like that. So those are kind of the two areas that we're looking at right now, ways to find critical documents, like where is my NDA repository, where's my purchase order repository, can I find all the execution copies of all the contracts that we've got for years and years and years, and then, knowledge management, like, people come and go, and, where's the documentation that we all need to find for our teams, no matter what team we're on.
That's a good point. KQ, anything to add there for, initiatives being funded right now?
Yeah, I mean, this is, it's kind of ironic. One of the ones I mentioned is just making sure that we are getting full advantage of the tools that we've already paid for, so that we will continue to fund them. Also, I spoke about this recently as well, is being more proactive about things like investigations, really being able to glean from the information you have, so that you can see behaviors that are outside the norm in terms of educating employees on risky behavior, or seeing where there might be a situation where exfiltration might be occurring or might be, impending, and really trying to handle those types of situations proactively, as opposed to, my team is the one that sets up investigations and gathers all the evidence and helps with the analysis. And so trying to prevent those things from happening in the first place by being proactive through using technology would really help us out quite a bit, because we're also handling the reactive type of work, such as the e-discovery requests and things like that.
So a little bit, a question came in, a little bit of a twist. Are any data initiatives being stifled today due to the pandemic? And if so, how much of a concern is that? KQ? Not really. I mean, my company has really been trying to make sure that employees feel empowered and safe, and wants the productivity to continue. I think that where we really have been affected has been kind of in the supply chain throughout the globe, because being that what my company does, and that we're the infrastructure for, for people being able to get onto the internet and 5G, that we're actually, we're still in business, but we need to be able to, there's a lot of hardware, there's a lot of other things in the supply chain. And so we've been somewhat affected by that, but people are continuing to be productive, things are going forward. The company's been very, very sensitive about not putting people in a bad position financially, really trying to keep people working and keep people feeling secure about their futures. Okay, that's interesting. So Mira, I'm going to take a step back, because we have a question that came in. When you say you're moving to Google, you mean you are abandoning Word and Excel. How on earth do you even remotely get remotely comparable functionality in these apps? Why are you discarding the knowledge of power users of those apps? So it's a multi-part question.
Multi-part and so judgy. Oh my goodness. So you remember when you introduced me, I spent 6 years at Google. So of course I'm going to evangelize for Google Enterprise platforms. Most users are familiar with the consumer free version of Gmail and Google Drive. The enterprise version is much more sophisticated, and Google is building it out all the time. And I'll stop my kind of pitch there. So we haven't abandoned Microsoft Word and Excel. And of course, there are some amazing power users in our finance department, in our legal team, project management, who are power users of Excel, my paralegal being one of them. So those programs are available to business groups who need them. They are just not in a collaborative environment, right? So I can provide licenses for whatever platforms in the Microsoft world that business the business needs, not Dish can provide licenses. And we still have the ability to preserve and collect data for litigation and e-discovery from those platforms. In my own legal world, I so rarely use Word or Excel because I'm not a Power Excel user. Everything I need to do for organization in a spreadsheet, I can do in Google Sheets. And then I can, share that document with my team or across teams for purposes of collaboration. I tend to use Microsoft Word only when my outside counsel is sending me briefs that are in close to final draft form that are going to be filed with the court. But for everyday note-taking, internal memo writing, I can find everything I need in Google Docs. The advantage the company believes it found switching from a Microsoft collaboration environment to G Suite was that it was both cost effective and provided a solution that most of the company could use. And it has proven, the timing, especially for Google Drive, has proven to be very helpful in the time of COVID. In the past, if I needed to get to a shared drive, one, I would hope that I actually had access to it. Two, I would have to log in through VPN, which would screw up a whole bunch of my other programs and be very slow. And then, navigate around a fairly bloated shared drive of years and years of data that had not been under retention management. So starting with a new platform and having the ability to contribute my thoughts about retention and preservation should prove very useful for the company, and I appreciate being involved in those conversations. So I hope I've answered the multi-part question. And I hope you can see kind of the logic in why we determined to make that change.
Well, it sounds like you gave users kind of the best of both worlds. They can continue to use some Microsoft applications while also migrating to the Google platform. KQ, did you have something you wanted to add there?
Yeah, so we actually utilize both as well, and we tried to give the different teams the ability to use what's going to work best for them, but also those of us who are on the side of creating policy or trying to think of having somewhat consistency and ubiquity. So we're trying to balance that, but my team probably has whiplash at this point because when I came in, we were putting all of our KM content in SharePoint. And then because we were doing a lot of collaboration in terms of some of the casework, trying to keep our status very timely. I'm a stickler for documentation. It worked better, in Google. And so we converted a lot of our day-to-day case management documents and have been working in G Drive. And then now that we've made the conversion over to from Skype to Teams, and we really want to utilize the Microsoft collaboration, I'm kind of moving some of it back to the Microsoft side. And my team, they're younger than I am, and so they haven't lived in both those worlds as long as I have. I think they're probably frustrated with me and KQ, what are we going to be using here? But really we're kind of trying to test both environments for what's going to work best for us, but we're still in both right now. And at some point I would like to move us over mostly to one. And I think that might be representative of what's happening with a lot of different groups and organizations out there.
Okay, thank you for taking those questions sort of on the fly. So we only have a couple of minutes left. So I thought maybe we just do a little round robin with the three of you and talk a little bit to close this out about developing synergies to optimize cross-functional teams. So we talked a lot about the benefits, but how do you actually get the teams to work together and create those synergies? And is that trickier in the time of COVID? So Carla, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of an art to creating synergy. Actually, it's choosing the team, which could be a combination of people that are the most knowledgeable about a process, but maybe also some influencers. It's developing a process of consistent communication, but also a common language and learning to understand people's own languages and perspectives, and a lot of sharing of methodologies and information. And so, in my experience, some of the best cross-functional teams are actually developed over time, sometimes coming out of a conflict or a complaint and transforming it into a collaborative experience. But also underlying that, you need commitment, and you need the commitment of, the leaders of the functions, sometimes senior management. And you were talking about reporting up, Sheila. I think one of the ways to strengthen these teams is to develop, a creative way to report up to the different functions and bring them together, so they also get an understanding of some of these cross-functional elements that the team is handling.
Okay. Mira, any last comments on that topic?
Sure. Real quickly, I think successful cross-functional teams have a mission. They benefit from good project management and milestones to achieving the result, which often the project manager can run. So whether you have regularly scheduled check-in meetings or more drawn-out goals, I think that's really helpful. And then on a personal level for developing synergies, I think legal has to be as invested and credible as every other team towards the goal. Many times legal is perceived as the ones who say no to the business, and that's just not an option. It never has been. And so, assuring your other team members that you are part of that team and working towards the same goal and will find solutions is how to gain their trust.
That's a good point. All right, KQ, close us out.
Oh, the pressure. I was going to give a consulting answer here, because a lot of people ask, like, who should drive these cross collaborative teams and things like that. And I was going to say, you can't really, it's not a one size fits all. Not only does it depend on the organization that you work for, the enterprise, but also the groups within the organization, the initiative, even down to the personalities. And so I think what's really important is to, like Mira said, have a mission and have organization and follow through. But you need to consider really what should the size of this team be? Something that's really across like an enterprise-wide collaboration is very different from a smaller group that's thinking about the culture of one particular org in the company or something like that. So again, trying to apply some kind of blanket rules across across every group or project is just, it's not going to work out. So.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining today's webinar. We appreciate it, and we hope to see you on a future webinar. Have a good day.